Thank you for listening to another episode of the Business of Fun podcast. I'm your host, Dave Wakeman. My guest today is a repeat guest, friend of the podcast, friend of Dave, Eric Fuller. I'm going to tell you about Eric and their conversation in just a moment. Before I do, I would like to remind you to check out the Talking Tickets newsletter. You can get that at talkingtickets.substack.com or by visiting my website, www.davewakeman.com. So let me get you to my conversation with Eric Fuller. This is, I think, Eric's sixth time being on the podcast. This one was a little feisty. I think you're going to find those feisty parts to be interesting. I will be curious to figure out what you make from this conversation. We talked about quite a lot. We talked about the current state of the business cycle, the ups and downs. We talk about how people, especially mass market events, people don't have as much money as they did. We talk about kind of the economic situation as a whole, or about Bitcoin and some of these other ideas. We talked about Live Nation and AEG and how the ability to break in tours and artists has changed. We talk about economic realities. We talk about platform businesses. We talk about NEVA and the 930 Club. We talk about the venues just all around DC. We talk about the resale legislation. We talk about demand, Montreal and Canada. We talk about 3 layers of the product. This one's like a little bit of kind of a all over the place as far as like the subject matter goes, but there's like some points of definite disagreement that I think will be interesting for you to hear. And so I'm going to turn this over to my conversation with Eric Fuller on the Business of Fun. You can definitely make faces because nobody's going to see it. That's true. I want to welcome Eric Fuller back to the Business of Fun podcast. Eric, what's good?
Dave, we're coming to the end of one crazy year.
Yeah, that's why I was going to have you here. And so I want to refute something at the very, very start of this podcast. And that is that I never prepare at all. And I never do any research for this thing, because I did spend about 3 to 6 seconds researching this conversation with you to know that you are the first 6-time podcast guest. This will be our 6th time doing a podcast for the Business of Fun platform in some way, shape, or form. There is no prize for that. There is no like jacket or anything like on SNL. It's just thank you for being here.
Okay, but with 10 you get egg roll at least, right?
Yeah, 10. Yeah, I'll at least we'll go to a Lucien and have a nice glass of red wine or something in the East Village.
I know you better than that, and it's going to be beer at the townhouse or townhome or whatever it's. But yes,
something. Yeah, well, something. Right, we'll do something. But thank you for coming on again. I mean, I think it was really more than anything. It was just we hadn't thought about recording one of these in a while. But like you said, it's kind of been an interesting year, and I have 4 or 5 notes here, just like directions we can go to. But you started out by saying it's an interesting year. We're getting to the end of. Why do you say that? And I know, but I want everybody to understand where your point of view comes from, because I think it'll inform the conversation we're going to have.
Well, since we're not on video, I guess I have to say that I'm heading toward being very old, and that means that I've seen a lot of cycles. And I think we're entering another down cycle, and that's going to have more impact on the ticketing business than any of the hysterical bills that are being put forward or the strategies that are running. I think that there's just a collapse coming in the consumer's capacity to spend money on anything other than necessities.
Mm-hmm.
And so the market is going to shift, and it's going to shift to rich people who can also always buy anything they want whenever, and people who are very tight on their dollars that are just going to say no thank you to the opportunity to see an act at Madison Square Garden for $1,000. They're just going to say no.
Yeah. I um I I don't disagree actually. I think there's a lot of numbers that point to the consumer and the fan being stretched as thin as possible right now. Uh, Consumer credit is like the highest it's ever been. I was telling you about the amount of the increase in defaults on mortgages and on car loans. There's like a lot of things going on, but I actually think though it's not just even going to be like like low income and like middle income. I think you're going to see like the people who just aren't like uber wealthy are also getting stretched thin because a report I saw that was like just like upper middle class people are feeling the pinch of like some of the like cost of living issues, and that's really like where a lot of the economy has been being supported is people who maybe aren't like super wealthy but like they're doing all right, and if they start feeling it, then that's like really going to create a crunch because a lot of these expensive tickets are being bought on credit and they're being paid back over time. And if that's like at risk, I don't know how you're going to sell a $4,000 Ariana Grande ticket. But maybe you have a different point of view on this.
No, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think, in fact, it's the opposite. I think we're moving away from I need to be on social media with a picture of me in the front row at some act for social status. I think that the ethic is going to move completely away from that. I also know as a student of history that you can read signals. I mean, the bell doesn't have to be at full volume for you to see it. But one of the things that was very, very obvious last week was the collapse of Bitcoin from $126,000 to $80,000 in a breathtaking drop. All of a
Hmm.
sudden, the Wall Street shorting strategy, which is used to be called MicroStrategy. It's the company that simply buys and aggregates Bitcoin, and the
Yeah,
whole
that's
the
right.
whole theory of that is that they're going to buy and hold Bitcoin forever, and the share value is twice the intrinsic value of the Bitcoin they hold. And so all of a sudden, Wall Street's no longer willing to pay 2x. Maybe they're willing to pay 0.7x coming up, at which case that's going to be quite a margin call. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that if you look at all the dot plots on the stock market, your
Hmm.
highs higher than we've ever seen in new highs. And the prevailing wisdom on the street at the moment that's being pushed out to the public is, well, yes, it's a bubble, but the bubble isn't inflated all the way yet. So hang on, which is code for let us sell out, right? And then
Yeah.
and then Papadala, So so I just see all of those things lining up. And let me go one more step. I think you're starting to see the immunity wash off of Donald Trump being able to do anything he wants to do. And so you're going to see government that doesn't run by fiat as much anymore. And maybe it moves back to some congressional oversight. All of those things line up with the idea that money's going to be tighter
Mhm.
and there'll be more pressure on ordinary folks. And ticketing's an ordinary folks thing.
Yeah. Ticket is like kind of in a lot of cases, even though there being a limited number of tickets for each event, is still one of the ultimate mass market things because maybe the big concerts there are super limited, but like your sports, your average entertainers, those things are all like you need people going several times, not just once, one and done. And I think that's you're absolutely right. If that starts pulling back, that's going to hurt a lot of people. Um, as far as Wall Street goes, I know that it's the price. What is it? The price to earnings ratio is higher even than it was during the dot-com bubble in 2000, which was kind of like sort of people's go-to example for bubbles. And yeah, the way I explain to people is like when the whole philosophy of what people are telling you to do is built on, well, the number goes up, then you're in trouble. You're in trouble, and you probably want to watch out. So, yeah, so I tend to sound like a pessimist when I say that, which I think is like the furthest thing from the truth. But it's like I just don't like to lose money, so I'm very good at like follow spotting patterns, and all the patterns that I see are not necessarily tell me to be cautious, is what it is.
And I think that's the right term. But I also think, there's a lesson to be taken from what happened post-pandemic with the movie industry. People had the habit of going to see movies in a theater, and even though there was price creep, the tickets slid from, $7 to $12 to $15 to $20 with a reclining seat, and popcorn was still $10, and you were going to be in that $100 for snacks with your
Yeah.
date. People went because it was just part of the way people spent an afternoon or an evening or a
Hmm.
week date. And after a year of everybody watching movies on Netflix on an 80-inch TV they bought at Costco for $1,000, they just never went back,
Hmm.
right? So now you see three or four movies that are tent post movies that everybody goes to, and everything else with really big budgets and really big stars dies, you know?
Yeah. Especially anything that's in the middle that doesn't have somebody in spandex and superpowers,
Right.
or Tom Cruise jumping out of helicopters, airplanes, and off of motorcycles. Uh, those are all really tough sells now.
And so I think that you're going to see that pattern shift in ticketing. I think that you're going to see mass market demand slide back while the times are tough, and I think times will be tough for a couple of years. And I think you're going to see less credit availability when things roll over. In every cycle, people's credit limits get cut. So if you have
Yep.
a $5,000 Visa card, you might only have $2,500 left. Or if you have a $5,000 Visa card and you owe $1,800 on it, your new limit might be $1,800.
Yep.
So
Uh-huh.
that slows things down really quickly.
Yeah.
I think the
And this happens even people with great credit, right? It's not just like people who have, are spending a lot of money. Like, it's not, because I want to make sure people are understanding, like, you can have an 800 credit score and have tons of like available credit. And then all of a sudden you get a note that says, oh, yeah, we cut that in half.
Yeah, I remember that vividly from 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Just all of a sudden, like, there was a slight panic in the banks, and
Hmm.
every credit limit that you possessed, no matter what your score was just decimated. So I think things are going to shift, and I think as part of it, we are in the post I, Taylor Swift. I have to pay anything to say I was there. I mean, she hasn't been on the road for better than a year. She's clearly going to get married and have babies, so she's not going back on the road for a minute at any scale. And I don't see anybody else out there with the draw power that she had. I remember being at Polestar 2 years ago when there was just the celebration going on that there had been $1 billion gate, and that gate meaning the total collection for
Hmm.
ticket tour, and there were all these projections that there would be 10 acts that would go out and do
Uh-huh.
$1 billion, and there were, let me think, none, right? And
Yeah.
and now I think we're in a cycle where post-pandemic, everybody's been making money by touring relentlessly. So it isn't like you have to see the band that you saw last year this loop because they're coming every year, if not more frequently. So you've removed scarcity as a driving
Yeah.
force.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting thing there, because there's two things that when you were talking about this that kind of stuck with me. Is number one is like when we were talking last week about setting this up, you were mentioning how Radiohead is playing from my playbook of like going, let me limit things and make it seem special. And I think that people have to get back to that, right? That was one of the big things. Even though Taylor Swift did tons of shows, it still felt like small and contained and special in its own way. But then the other thing is like the mass market of tickets will go away because times are tough and people just don't have the money. And so there's two things, right? It's like number one, everybody's just figured out, just give me more and more and more. I can go out and tour every year. And at the same time, if people are pulling back and that strategy is not working, I don't feel like the chops are there to necessarily market and sell these shows the way that they need to be sold in a tough environment like this. And I'd be curious because, like you said, you've seen a couple of these cycles.
Yeah, I think it's a different model you're going to see going forward. And the model is going to be this. And actually, interestingly, both Live Nation and AEG are actively setting uh, the tone. You're not going to be able to go out there and just charge massive prices and try and make, hundreds of millions of dollars just because you're on the road. You're going to have to go back to building a base, and you're going to have to go back to creating a base that wants to come see you, but they don't want to see you too much. So the strategy is going to become a global strategy in which you're going to tour in the U.S. and Europe and Australia, and they're opening new uh, access into the Asian countries. And so you may be on the road for 3 years, going all the way around before you repeat. And that's how you sort of maintain the scarcity. And once you get out of North America, prices were never what we've been seeing here. They've always been much more reasonable because people outside of the United States seem to have a more practical approach to, no, I'm not paying that, right? So
Hmm.
I think you're going to see prices normalize, and I think you're going to see competition continue to increase because everybody's going to learn they have to take a global turn in order to stay on the road and stay busy. You just can't show up twice a year in a 2 million cap city and try and fill an arena. Maybe you can fill a 5,000 seat club, but that's less efficient.
Yeah.
So, you
No.
know, it's not a free pass to everybody gets to have their own private jet anymore. That was a wrinkle in time, and that wrinkle passed.
Yeah, you have to kind of go back to and get your chops again. You forget everything has gotten easy, and now it's not going to be easy. And I think that's like the interesting thing about any kind of new economic cycle, is that the economic cycle that we are coming out of, right? And again, I'm more pragmatic about this than I am like pessimistic. It was driven by the zero interest money, right? And it was just the free and cheap money for so long. And what that did was that just taught everybody, it inflated this financial bubble where like, you know, everything could get, you could charge a fortune for tickets because people had available credit because they were just giving the credit away. And then now that's deflating. It's deflationary, and I guess what you're seeing is that things are not necessarily unusual in America as people thought they were. It's just that our environment was much different, and I think that's interesting because one of the big things that's going on is these a lot of these rules, the legislation, a lot of these challenges to the current ticket environment, and I think things have gotten out of control in tickets, but I think also that these fixes, I'll use in quotes, even though nobody can see what we're doing here, these fixes are backwards looking, and I'm kind of curious what you think about, some of these legislative fixes and some of these things that are working on, because I think it fits into where the economy is at the moment.
Well, I think that um, you're seeing reality come back in some ways, and governments are trying to get attention, particularly in North America. Across the U.S., the only place that the Democrats and the Republicans seem to agree on anything is, let's change the rules around ticketing, because that seems to resound well with the public. But the problem is nobody understands what they're talking about. And you know this, Dave. When Taylor Swift broke the internet, I was the guy that had to go to Washington D.C. the next day and explain to the Senate staff how ticketing works. And I just looked at a sea of glazed eyes as I was trying to explain the very basics. Now you've got uh, the District of Columbia getting ready to pass a 10% price cap on tickets, and expect that will work. The intention is to wipe out the StubHubs and SeatGeeks of the world. But what it's really going to do is wipe out the security and safety protocols that the last 10 years has been spent building, so that consumers have a variety of safe, capitalized, respectable proper organizations that provide tickets and security. And it's sort of like if you were to think about the hotel business for a minute, when you walk into a hotel that's flagged as a Marriott or a Hyatt or a Hilton, you're pretty comfortable that you know what you're going to get. And the prices may be different between them. And there may be, the Four Seasons, which costs more, and there may be the Motel Sixes, which cost less. But behind all of those are corporate organizations that you can trust your credit card deposit, and your charge will be what you're agreeing to pay. And if you cancel the reservation within the time limits, you'll get your money back. And
Hmm.
just, you choose the level of comfort that you're willing to spend. Um, that imagine that the government said, well, you know what? It actually only costs you, $32 a night in debt service to operate that hotel. So the maximum you can charge for the room is $40. I mean, that would be the end of all hotels because you actually need to pay for more things.
Well, let me ask you this because I think this is I think the audience for this is pretty diverse, and I know that I think what where you ask the question from and how you ask the question probably informs a lot of the way that the conversation happens. And so I think that I guess what I would ask anybody is, what is the challenge? What is the problem you're trying to solve for? Are you trying to solve for the price of the tickets? Because, because then that's one question. Or are you trying to stop some of the bad behavior of the secondary market? And so if you're trying to control the prices of the tickets, then a resale cap seems like probably a kind of like not the best way to approach this challenge. If you are trying to stop the bad actors on the secondary market, again, a 10% cap does not necessarily seem like the right answer. So you spend more time talking to on these legislative issues than I do because frankly, I live in DC and I don't want to ever have to deal with anybody that's involved in federal or local government because I find them all to be mostly useless at this point. But so I want to ask you, like, what question are they asking when they're trying to solve for these problems? Because again, though, when I look at it, I come back to those two kind of questions and I go, well, this kind of legislation it won't solve either problem, I don't think.
No, it won't. Of course, it'll just drive it into a black market. Um, I mean, the craziness of this is that the argument is that these secondary markets manipulate the pricing to make it more expensive for consumers. And on a very simple glance, it would seem like that would be a true statement. Well, it costs more on StubHub than it does to buy it from Ticketmaster uh, when it originally goes on sale. And sure, right? But it also costs more to buy sushi in a restaurant than it does to go to the fish market and buy it on the dock,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
like anything, where in the chain of distribution do you jump in? Do you want to be in a queue for 40 minutes waiting to see if you can even get access to buy a ticket? And then when you've paid for that ticket, which is dynamically priced, it may actually be higher in price than what the ticket resells for later because the show tanked. I mean, there's the whole pays to wait argument, which half the time or better gives you tickets that are, less than the original face value because what do you know, supply was too big and prices collapsed. And very famously years ago, there was a Gordon Lightfoot show in the middle of the country somewhere, and all the
Do people
brokers,
even know who Gordon Lightfoot is at this point? I mean,
nobody,
you do. I
no
know
one
who he.
does.
Yeah, I've
Well,
heard
well,
of him.
yeah. Well, he's a little bit younger than Davy Crockett, but the whole point was all the brokers. He was hot for the minute, and all the brokers went in and bought out the show, and nobody showed up because nobody wanted the tickets. So Gordon Lightfoot got paid, and his team got paid, and the venue got paid, and the brokers ate all the tickets. So you just never know. You tell me right now. Tell me this morning. Nvidia stock They said their earnings were up 65%. They were worth more than $4 trillion. Are they going to be worth $8 trillion next year? Are they going to be worth $2 trillion? Are the Chinese going to come out with a chip for a nickel? I mean, it's tickets. You can't tell what tickets are going to be for an event as a consumer because you don't know how many more shows they're going to add. You don't know if the show that went on sale for Thursday and sells out is going to be followed by a show on Friday and then a show on Saturday and then a show on Monday, or if it's a one and done.
Yeah. And I think that like the argument you make takes me back to the initial question I was or idea that I was floating, which is that in this downturn period or in this period where there's a lot more uncertainty, is I don't necessarily know if the skills are available to price and promote and market these things the way they are, because a lot of the worst, it's a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy a little bit, right? Which is like um, a venue or a promoter will put a show on sale. The show will sell out maybe instantly because there's a mix of brokers and fans that buy the thing. Um, they'll add a second show, maybe a third show. All those tickets will get snapped up, but then there's no real underlying demand, right? There's no demand for three shows of Gordon Lightfoot in DC next week. And part of it's so some of these bad habits, everybody's involved. Or am I wrong? I mean, I know I'm not wrong. I'm asking the question because I know I'm right.
Dave, you're always right. You're right. Look, let's go back to my favorite whipping horse here. Let's talk about the 930 Club and the whole IMP group in Washington D.C. Um, so that collection of four venues in D.C., the 930 Club, the Anthem, the Lincoln, and the Atlantis. Um,
Well, it's more than that, actually. It's the Merriweather Post Pavilion, it's the Lincoln Theater, the 930 Club, the Atlantis, the Anthem, and I believe there's actually one, but there's five or six venues, so it's a little
There's
larger.
five. There's five, but I
Yeah.
left out the one that's in Maryland. So there's four in DC, and it's in DC where they're trying to shove the bill through. So let's talk about that for a minute.
Okay.
So there was a hearing that was commissioned, maybe a month or so ago, where there was a Council Member Allen, and
Hmm.
they were collecting information about what people thought about the idea that there would be a 10% cap on reselling the tickets. In other words, if you face value of the ticket was 100, the most you could sell it for was 110, and that was it, and that was all, and anything more than that was illegal. And now that's the bill that they are proposing. And so they had an open hearing, and I was asked to speak at that hearing. So let's start with this. This is a Zoom call. You have no idea when it's your turn to talk. You just have to wait. Now, I got to talk third from the last, at which point I was given 3 minutes after having been on the Zoom call from Paris, France for 7 hours. At the end of the fifth hour, there was nobody on the Zoom call left that was a council member. There was just some person on behalf of the council saying, your turn to talk, your turn to talk, right? The first hour of the portion that addressed ticketing was more or less the 930 Club management in a series of uh, different configurations. They would bring in more people and more people and more, and bring in the first four and talk to them, bring in the next four, and it was like welcoming the royal family. May we do something more for you? I mean, it couldn't have been more scripted, right? It couldn't have been more, oh my God, I can't believe you people are so right and what's wrong? It's just it was a love fest, right? We love cookies. We have cookies, right? And then they brought in like StubHub and SeatGeek to ask questions of them. And it was like, how dare you act in this fashion where you steal from the people that want to go see stuff? And it was like, I, I'm was shocked at the way this was staged. There wasn't not even a pretense that it was a neutral hearing. It was a coronation of a theory, and the people that came in, they're good-hearted people, but they just don't have the education to understand what they're talking about, in my opinion. So they brought in the woman that runs the 930 Club, and I'm blanking on her name. Help me. Um,
Let's see here. Hold on. We'll go to the internets.
it's
I will come. We will come back to that. I know. Audrey Fix Schaefer.
Audrey
That's the
Fix right.
yeah.
Audrey Fix Schaefer, who is everywhere talking about how terrible it is that the tickets for the 930 Club and the Anthem and the Lincoln and the Atlantis are on all the secondary sites, and they have on their website now, if you buy stuff from a secondary site, they reserve the right to cancel the ticket and to prevent you from ever buying another ticket from the 930 Club or whichever of those four clubs, which is just stunning in its audacity. And their complaint was that all these secondary sites, SeatGeek, StubHub, etc., are just ripping off fans. So I learned how to do homework a long time ago. So I thought I would do a little bit of homework, and I thought, well, first of all, everything I hear about the finances of that group is that they're circling the drain. So I'm not sure how well they're doing economically because Washington, D.C. is not the most cash-laden population. Um, and I looked, and yes, exactly what you'd expect. The entire lineup for all those venues was available on all the secondary markets, as everything is, and we call that distribution, right? And that is probably distribution that none of these clubs are getting organically on their own. So I thought, well, it must really be a problem. All these shows must be sold out because under the theory that the 930 Club that Audrey Fix Schaefer is advancing, that the tickets have all been sold out and they're being sold to the public at crazy prices. And you know what? I looked at every single show this morning for the 930 Club, the Anthem, the Lincoln, and the Atlantis from today till the end of June. The Between the four venues, there are 212 shows scheduled, 88 at the 930 Club, 39 at the Anthem, 39 at the Lincoln, and 46 at the Atlantis. Of those 212 shows, 178 shows are available for sale on the website of each of those respective clubs. And what I don't think the advocates either know or more likely don't want to admit is the fact that you can see the ability to buy a ticket on SeatGeek doesn't mean that anybody bought that ticket. It just means if you happen to become aware by SeatGeek advertising that a ticket you want to get is at the Anthem, you could buy it there. And yeah, it might cost you $10 more. But by the same token, the person that bought that from SeatGeek never saw it on the Anthem site and would never have gone likely. That's how distribution works. So you've got a group of four theaters here that has 16% of the shows that they have scheduled for the next half year sold out, and 84% of the shows on sale. And when I looked at the distribution of shows that have sold out, it's sort of scattered throughout that period. It's just the occasional, hey, you actually caught one that has high demand. Most of the shows, nobody actually cares. They might buy tickets at the last minute. So the whole theory of we need these price caps to stop the secondary markets from torquing the valuation of the tickets to the public is crazy. They need more distribution. I would suggest that group of theaters is probably in dire financial trouble, if not now, soon, because you're going to see that very population of, yeah, maybe I want to go, maybe I want to go not, kind of falling off as money gets tighter.
Okay, so let me unpack this a little bit. So the number one thing about the wealth of the district in the area around the district, so the DMV, is one of the more wealthy areas. But the challenge is that like it's really concentrated, which I think goes back to the initial conversation we were having. Um, which is that like even people who are in the middle class or even upper middle class, which a lot of people in DC because they're attached to either like government contractors, government workers, and they get paid a most cases a livable wage or a something that they can subsist some can live off of, but the cost of living has exploded in the district. There are huge pockets of extreme wealth through the lobbyists and the different like contractors and things like that. So that's number one on this. Number two, though, is when you're talking about like only 16%, I think you said, of the shows being sold out. Again, that seems to reinforce the issue that I talked about, which is that like all across the board, people having an doing a poor job of marketing and selling the things that they have, because one of the arguments that the secondary market makes is like going, well, it just happens to have high demand, which I think is bullshit, to be quite frankly, because you have to create that demand somewhere. And that's, I think, sometimes when this argument comes up, people talk about like demand in the free market, like these things just magically pop up and appear. And I know that that's a completely horseshit argument, because it's not like I have studied marketing all over the world, and I know that marketers are the ones who are creating demand in partnership with venues, promoters, people. Like these things aren't just magically appearing, but only having 16% of shows sold out highlights the importance of needing to be able to develop the demand, which comes back to the idea that I think if you're trying to, is that you're looking at the problem from the wrong point of view, right? Which is like, it's not necessarily the secondary market that is your enemy. It's like, why is it so expensive for the secondary, like tickets to be on the secondary market, number one? And part of the reason, like if the fees that StubHub or Vivid or anybody is charging are so expensive, it's because it's so freaking hard or expensive to pay for advertising on these things. It's like the root cause of this is like consolidation and lack of competition, which thankfully in some cases the secondary market helps with. Now, is that making me say that I am a like extreme proponent of the secondary market or extreme proponent? I think I'm somewhere in the middle. But I think this, again, these bills and all of these solutions, they start from the wrong place, which is like going, what's the fundamental issue you want to solve for? And so like when I paid a little attention to this because I'm in DC, and I was just like, I think it's starting from the wrong point.
Well, Dave, I think the people in DC are aware of the clubs, and if they want to go, they buy the tickets from the clubs. They may drive over and buy it right at the box office, so they don't pay any fees. But what I think these clubs forget is that DC, like a lot of cities, attracts a great deal of visitors that come in to do business in town and then want to do something at night. And they don't know who the clubs are necessarily. They go on to, Google or something, and they type Washington D.C. concert, and then it throws them to whoever bought the most Google keywords,
Right,
and that's where they find out that there's a show at the Anthem that night.
right.
So you want to solve the problem? Oh, let's price cap Google. Google took like $1.5 billion or more last year.
I believe I said that. That was the root cause, is like how much people have to spend on advertising, and then
Yeah,
whether or not the advertising actually is effective.
right. And the case that's so fascinating is even with Google driving the visibility of all those shows across, and not only Google, also Meta, across all these platforms that are out there continuously pushing information to consumers, the shows still are not selling out. So if you wipe out that segment that has, more than $1 billion of advertising every year going out to consumers, just basically saying buy tickets, and we're not selling you out, you need more advertising. And you don't have the money. And you don't have the reach, 930 Club in your group, Seth and Audrey. You don't have the reach across the 50 states. And I think the real problem here is that during the pandemic, um, this group of folks put together the National Independent Venue Association, and they lobbied Congress and said all these small venues are going to die if you don't give us money, and they got $16 billion in free money. And all of a sudden they thought, whoa, wait a minute, maybe there's another play for us where we can try and use legislation as opposed to using competition. And I think legislation was a one-off. Yeah, you may see uh, some of these little 10% price cap bills pass, but they won't hold. They'll make it harder. You'll see more failures of venues, and frankly, you'll see less opportunity for musicians to get in front of their fans.
Yeah, I I think to me, right, it's the there seems to just be there's just always or it feels like there's always a push to limit competition. And and one of the things that really am always pushing is the idea that there needs to be more competition, to create incentives for people to market and sell more effectively. So again, I just look at the root cause of these things, and I go, it doesn't add up for me, right? It's and I get it, right? If I'm working for a small venue, then I want to eliminate. Well, I'll go back. We'll use my experience in nightclubs. I did not. It was great that there were so many nightclubs in Fort Lauderdale when I was starting out. It was bad though because it cost so freaking much money to market and promote the nightclub. So I would, in theory, I always want there to be less competition. But in practice, what I found is that if there's less competition, um, everybody loses because you become lazy in the way you service, the way you run your business, the way you offer value to people. um, and in regards to like the way tickets are marketed and sold, it really is a detriment to the industry, right? There are a couple of really huge acts at the top that do very well. And then there's like a lot of like middle class, like middle of the road, middle class bands that struggle. And then there's a lot of bands that like really should have the ability to develop over time that have no hope. And so when I look at these bills or some of the actions and some of the things like issues that are being offered, I do wonder sometimes if like you're the answer is the questions being asked poorly. And again, that's just like the way I see it all the time. It's like, what's the root cause? Well, the root cause is I would like to have, or the root question is, I'd like to have my venue sold out a lot more than 16% of the time. Well, then there's a whole list of questions or that you can ask to get you there, right? It's like, am I putting people in the right places? What's my pricing strategy? How can I make this have more value to people? How can I make it easier for people to go? What are all these things? Um, and the truth is I know that like a 10% cap on resale is not going to stop resale. It's just going to change it. And it's probably, like you said, it's going to make it a little less safe for customers to buy from. It's going to make it probably even more expensive for people in a lot of cases. Um, and it's probably not going to solve the ultimate root issue. But again, I might be completely out of line.
All right, I'm ready for a prediction. I'm just gonna go.
Okay,
I'm
fire
gonna
away.
I'm gonna jump off a bridge here. I think this is old school thinking that if nobody was counterselling against us, then we would just sell all the tickets ourselves at a more fair price to the consumer. That's the argument that's being advanced by Audrey Fix Schaefer and her group. I think it's um, delusional.
Right.
Um, and at the moment, uh, you are seeing a massive shift, and it's nothing that I hear about yet, but you're about to hear about it. Um, there's the money that's going out to Google is not returning the yield so that the secondary markets can
That's
survive,
right. Hmm.
right? And here's what's going to change everything. AI, right? AI is going to change it all. People are not going to be searching Google as much anymore. They're going to be on Grok or on Gemini, and they're going to be saying, what's the best place to get a ticket to see, fill in the blank at the 9:30 Club? And and it's going to deliver you to a purchase click, and it might be directly from the 9:30 Club. It might be from somebody that's wholesaling a ticket for 50 cents on the dollar. It's going to accelerate the speed at which the price decay occurs. One of the things that was fascinating this morning as I was going through all the shows through the end of June was that 10% of the sold out shows are John Mulaney, who's doing a 4 night stand, and he sold out the first three. Um, you know, the thing that everybody forgets about ticketing is you can't force people to buy the tickets. Demand is organic. Demand is organic. If you're lucky enough to book someone and then they get hot on a song, or they get a spot on Saturday Night Live, or somehow they've got buzz. A minute ago it was Young Blood. Um, Everybody runs to go see that, and then it's forgotten, right? And at those levels, at the smaller venue levels, most of the time you're just trying to create enough noise that you can break even operationally.
See, I disagree with the organic idea. It is because it makes things seem like there's no control. There's like strategy, marketing, promotion, sales. They play no part in this. And I know that, again, that is a bullshit argument, right? That's as forceful as I can say about it. Because the thing is like, if someone breaks, like, if someone happens to get on Saturday Night Live and so all of a sudden people are exposed to their song, like Courtney Barnett was a good one. I saw her on Saturday Night Live. I was like, oh my God, she's amazing. I got tickets to see her show because she was going out on tour. That is that's strategy, right? That's artistic, that's creativity. She had the product, she had the promotion, she had a plan in place. So this organic argument is it's horseshit. Um, what I would say though is it goes back to my hypothesis, which is like people have got to be smarter about the way that they are thinking about strategy, thinking about marketing, and thinking about sales. Let's jump over to like the world of like arts and Broadway, just to show you how applicable this is. There is over 50% of the arts organizations in the country are operating at a financial deficit, and because most of them are sitting there, we're going. Hopefully, Hamilton will come through on its tour this year, or there will be another Hamilton, and that is a stupid way to run your business, right? Um, Most of the sports teams, because I know I spend so much time in sports, they're all sitting there going, well, if we win, it'll solve all of our problems. No, it won't, because if you win, it might get people to come once, but if they don't have a good time, they don't have a good experience, they like everything's complicated or not great, they won't come back. It's you have to think holistically about the whole system. You have to think about the entire experience people are having, and so none of this happens organically. And again, everything that like I hear coming from you or like the people, don't even get me started on some of the batshit theories that some of these brokers I run into tell me. But when I talk to people on the primary side, everywhere, it's the fundamental question is like, how do I create this experience that people are willing to pay for, right? How do I get people to get off their couch, right? To spend money in my venue over something else? And that starts with like strategy, marketing, branding. Um, and then, so when I see the legislation, right, I go, what fundamental issue is it starting? Or figuring, or is it solving for it? And I don't see any of these arguments. I just don't see that answer. I don't see anybody even asking that question.
Well, I think we're sideways on an ancillary point there. I really think that most people in their daily lives aren't paying attention to what's coming up. They certainly
Oh,
don't.
we're not sideways on that. We know for sure that people aren't. I mean, I have like decades of research that we are like most bands and concert or bands and teams have an advantage. They are a little bit more of somebody's peace of mind than most things, but still people aren't paying nearly as much attention as you'd want them to. That is 100% across the board.
Right. So when something of demand goes on sale, most people miss it. When something of no demand goes on sale, everybody misses it. And the question is, what is the difference between sold out or oversold shows, or where demand exceeds the supply, and the vast majority of it's never going to sell out, right? And the numbers I keep seeing are 96, 97% of the stuff that goes on sale is never going to sell out. So to put legislation and restriction and price fixing and price caps and all this on top of the 2% or less of the shows in which demand exceeds supply is it just seems irrationally nuts. It just, you're not going to solve the problem. The problem, if you are in the business of selling $100 bills for $95, you will have unlimited demand
That's
no
exactly right.
matter what the rule, right?
That's not marketing.
Right. But that's so the idea, and that's why those tickets are dynamically priced, and they're going to charge whatever they can get for them. Because on balance, the people that are that 2% that have that demand, they worked for it for their whole lives, and they're going to enjoy that moment. The
Yeah.
Foo Fighters are selling well, even with a little bit of nonsense in the last couple of years. But they've been around 25 years.
Yeah.
Radiohead, been around a long time. You don't see a lot of Chapel Rowans that come out of nowhere and blow up. I mean, I watched that happen at Coachella. I watched her on the stage in one of the tents playing to 10,000 people. And she could have played on the major stage to 100,000. And within 4 months, she was filling stadiums every place. That's almost never, right? And so you don't build a whole strategy around that. You have to look at this enormously complex ecosystem that runs from a guy with a guitar in a bar in Nashville all the way to somebody playing, the MetLife Stadium. And you just can't have that diversity of acts and venues and make simplistic and frankly unrealistic rules surrounding it. You'll just
Yeah.
you'll just break down all the work that was done to make sure that ticketing works. And let me just give you couple quick examples.
Of course.
All right. I was just out on one of the tours that I'm out, looking at stuff, and I was in Montreal, Canada, where I had never been to see a show, but Paul McCartney was playing at the Bell Center. I didn't have the slightest idea what the Bell Center would be. I figured it'd be like an 8,000 seat hockey arena or something. 21,000 seats in this place. 2 nights back to back. 42,000 people. You know how many issues I saw at the gate? None. Now maybe there was one or two, but the tickets were left for me at the box office. I walked in, there were two people in line at the box office. I had my tickets. Both nights, same thing. No issue. Went in. Everybody was happy. Low key, calm. Um, I was in New York a couple days later and just decided, hey, Maroon 5's playing at the Garden. I was 5 blocks away. Haven't seen them in a long time. Bought a ticket on one of the secondary markets for undervalue. Walked into the Garden, tapped my phone, went through, all good. And the place was sold out. So those are 20,000 seat venues with no recognizable problem with people getting tickets that work going in these giant venues. So how is it that you need all kinds of government intervention for clubs that can't sell out 17% of their shows? I mean, it's a lie. The whole thing's a lie. Are there going to be problems once in a while? Sure. You know what the biggest problem that we notice is? It's not that people's tickets are bad. It's that they don't know how to find them in their phone. And I'm old enough now that I remember when digital tickets first started coming out. And one of the guys that works for me is pretty savvy. And I would probably 1 out of 3 times call him from a venue and be like, hey, where's my ticket? How do I get it? And they'd be like, okay, listen, Grandpa, you know, swipe
I
up.
actually think there's an ongoing on on Twitter, there is an ongoing gag that Garrett Nolan, friend of the show, Garrett Nolan has about like with a picture of have your tickets loaded in your wallet or
Yeah,
something of that thing. Yeah, yeah, like the technology is a big barrier.
right. I mean, I mean, once in a while there's demand failures. Once in a while there's an error, but you don't get to have publicly traded companies that don't deliver tickets. There's always some glitches in every system. People get kicked off of airplanes because the plane is undersold or oversold or misrouted. I mean, nothing's flawless 100% of the time, but given the thousands of shows that go off around the world every night, the incidence rate of a problem is effectively zero. And we are trying to legislate ourselves into a problem by withdrawing all the money and computer technology that's being continuously created to make it easier. Now pretty much everything just shows up if you have an iPhone on your Apple Wallet. So, you just add it to your wallet and you can find it in 2 seconds. You don't have to go
I was gonna
look.
say it just pops up as like a notification, no matter who you bought it from, in most cases because of as soon as you get close to the venue.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I
And it's
mean
going to
that issue has definitely been solved.
right. So, again, this is a solution in search of a problem. Um, and and the idea that, some group that can't sell 17%, more than 17% of their tickets can make the rules for everybody is, I mean, I don't know. I guess you could let your supplier of surgical supplies try and pass laws about how doctors should diagnose, but that just doesn't make any sense, and neither does this.
That's called the American healthcare system, and that's a different podcast, Eric. We don't talk about that here. That's a different one.
Okay, I went
Uh,
off. I'm sorry, Dave.
no, I am empathetic to the issues on both sides. I think I can safely say that. Um, my ultimate concern goes to the um, with the fans, right? Because without because I buy that philosophy that without a customer, you don't have a business. And you've heard me say that on many venues and many forums many times before, and that a lot of times what gets lost in these conversations is the fan. The fan misses out. The fan is like a useful tool for making a point, or making it, or it's just looked at as an ATM. And I think that like some of this argument can often feel like, again, the fan is helpful because I need this fan to make a point. And on the other side, it can be the fan is useful because I can extract as much money as I possibly can from him. And I think that like what really seems to be being, and then there's the government, which the government I have always said is making these. I'm happy to make these arguments because it takes away, it distracts us from them not doing much of anything. Uh, so and my feeling is just like there's so many shows and there's so many tickets that need to be sold and there's so much opportunity that there ought to be a solution that works for everybody, and that shouldn't be that everybody's like throwing cake at each other and talking about how awful each other is. Do I think that the way the system works right now is good or flawless? And I would say no to both. But I really think that like the big issue is that everybody needs to get back to like those like those first order thinking, and that's like on how do we create fans for life? How do we create fans that want to come out to our shows, to our performances, to our games, to our matches, to everything, and then how do we give them the most awesome experience that they can get so that we can keep them coming back for more? And doing and capping, capping resale is not necessarily going to do that, because it doesn't even begin to talk about like the loopholes that would be in a bill like this, which is like how the fees that a platform can charge, because those aren't necessarily connected to how much the ticket costs. Because you can say that I have a 10% cap on the ticket, but then I'm going to charge you 50% in fees. And like so, it's just like you said, it's unless it's framed well and done right, it's a solution in search of a problem.
Well, and there's another thing, Dave, and it's just never spoken about thoughtfully, and that is from the perspective of the consumer going into any of these venues, that it's the ticket's only part of it. Once you walk into the venue, you are offered a smorgasbord of food or drink options. And some venues do a really lovely job of giving you quality options, and some venues give you horrible options. And that's part of the hospitality. And then some are thoughtful in their pricing so that, that's expensive but not punishing. And I was I was at a venue recently, a newer venue, and I got two beers, one for me and one for my daughter who was with me. And the tab for the two beers was $39.99 in plastic cups.
Yeah.
Two plastic cups, $40 for the pair. Other places that I've been to recently, $9 in a glass with the waitress that brings it to you and takes it. So you have to also think about, well, is the ticket a trap, so that once you're inside the stadium, you've got to buy an $18 hot dog and a $32 can of what do you call it, sparkling cider or something, hard cider, Mike's hard cider, or
If you're drinking that, you're not hanging out with me, so that's
well,
okay.
that's not me, Dave. I'm talking about, it's just it's the insanity of of a 20, this. When I went to Sphere, I went to Sphere, properly said Sphere, not the Sphere, and I saw a show, and I bought a 22-ounce can of beer. It was like $22. It was
Yeah.
like, here's a can of beer out of a refrigerator that I got myself.
You
And
knew that you could bring up the beer prices and that you would set me off. You knew this.
I
You're
had to
right
wait,
though
Dave. I
about
had to heat you up first.
you had to heat me up, but you're right. People don't talk about the three layers of the product nearly enough. I don't even know, like most of the time, because of the siloed nature of so many organizations, they don't consider it. But I don't want to ruin anybody's perception of this place being a conversation of enlightened nature, but I will teach this one because I do teach this in my brand management class to my wonderful MBA students. There's three layers of the product. Ticket is that is the first layer, right? The ticket's just admission to the thing. Then you have the value, right? So that could be like you're going to have the ability to see your favorite band, see go on a date, all these different things. But the one you bring up most importantly is like you have to think about the augmented product, which is the entire experience, and that's Lord, we could spend a day on how abusive the relationship between is in that context now. But one thing I will bring up, since you opened the door on this, because you have been beating up on the 930 Club and the Anthem all on this thing today. The beer selection at the 930 Club is exceptional. They had some really nice beers the other night when I went to see a show. And at the Anthem, the bars are really strong. So I have no issue. And the birthday cupcake is an amazing feature.
What's the price of the beer there, though?
I think it's like $9, maybe $9.50.
Okay, so not terrible.
No, not at all.
But
Especially when it's like
what do you think?
$20 at a Nats game. So
What do you think the margin is on that, though?
I don't know the exact beer cost anymore. It used to be if you had a bottle, but these are way long ago. It was like we were selling, again, just for comparison's sake, when in nightclubs we would buy enough volume that each beer would cost us about 66 cents, and we'd sell it for, and that's Bud Light and we'd sell it for $4. So the margins are typically pretty substantial especially on draft beer. Draft beer was cheaper.
Okay, so is it reasonable to say that, on balance, 20 times cost, something like that?
Is that right? So I don't know if 20 times cost might be because then you have to get into the cost of goods and services, and I don't necessarily know how much the maintenance on these buildings are, the whole bundle of costs that are associated. Um, I would say though, if you just go by the price of the beer, you're probably easy. 20 seems maybe like a reach, but you might be like you can safely say 7 or 8 times.
Okay, so
Yeah. Again, I
so
don't know that those are numbers I don't know as well anymore.
so
I used to know
seven
them very well because that was what I had to pay attention to.
so 70 times the markup they want to allow on tickets.
Look, I get the argument. I also don't think that like what you're necessarily that the solution a bill like this is necessarily going to create the solution that is being asked of it. So like I'm not going to argue for or against the bill because I think that just when I think it's framed incorrectly because I just don't know what the ultimate goal is.
Well, the only reason I
Because
bring it
like
up,
you said, if you're only selling out 17% of your shows, it seems like you're doing something just because you can. It can feel like you're doing something just because you can.
well, so I was trying to get to a different point, and the point was that the consumers
A
are
10% margin on beers, I will vote for. If that's what you're trying to get to, I'll allow it.
no, that's you know what? I would support it. I would support any venue that wants to say that the ticket margin can only be marked up 10%, so long as their costs on food or beverages are similarly only marked up 10%. That deal goes through. And if they don't like that deal, then how about this one? The consumers decide what they're willing to pay. And so if they're willing to pay more someplace else to go to your venue, okay, you can buy gasoline at 5 different stations and it's the same gas and it's different prices. It has to do with convenience and just habit and whether or not you're economically impacted by the negligible difference in price.
The augmented product says that everything, there's the value, and the perception of value matters. And I think that, that I can easily make an argument for or against um, the closed system that we have right now on the primary side. I can make an argument for and against the open market that like the secondary market offers up. Um, I can argue for against all of those ideas. And what I think in most cases is that this just is, is you have to really consider what it is that you want to give the fan, because without the fan, you don't have anything. Um, and that if you're charging $20 for a Bud Light, you are definitely wrong. And that I can't defend that one in any way, shape, or form.
So here's how as we move to the end of this, let me try and tie this all together because this is kind of heading where I thought I would head. Uh, I think that if you just step back 1 minute and look at this from 10,000 feet, you've got Live Nation and AEG. Collectively, those two companies are worth $50 billion or more. And between them, they substantially distribute all the significant tickets in North America other than the sports teams. But the sports teams operate on the same model. And if you look at the sell-through between AEG and Live Nation, uh, and then you look at how much moves outside of their ecosystem through the secondary markets, the bulk of that isn't um, that people are just moving prices up. The bulk of that is the fact that even with the strength that AEG and Live Nation or Ticketmaster have, they can't get the attention to get people to react to the vast majority of what goes on sale. It never hits the radar. And so when you look at the power that AEG and Ticketmaster Live Nation have to advertise and promote and attempt to distribute tickets, the fact that they can't get that job done for 98% of the tickets suggests that you need all possible options to try to get somebody somehow to see something go past them that go, oh, I need to buy that ticket, I want to go, right? And the path to that isn't as direct as these venues want it to believe. I think the 930 people actually believe that left alone, people would just buy all their tickets from the 930 club. My belief is that if nobody other than the 930 club ever sold tickets for the 930 club, the 930 club would be out of business in 90 days because there's just not enough demand organically, or maybe you don't like that word, not enough demand locally to fill the venue, and certainly not enough to touch all the people that are coming from all over the world to the greater Washington, D.C. area.
Yeah. So as we close this up, so you're telling me that number one, people don't know what they're doing as far as in a lot of cases they price poorly across the board, and and I was like, I think that like almost sets up the conversation about dynamic pricing, which again I cover in great detail in my upcoming brand management course.
Dave, how do you get on that management course?
No, that's you got to go to school for that. Nobody's got time for that, except for the students who they love me. No, and I would agree with that because I think some of this experimentation with price has the opposite effect of what it does, which is like, oh, we can learn all this information. I go, you can also learn by talking to people. People thinking that like, oh, if I just cleared away everything, it would make the world easier for me. They miss a big point, which is A plus B is greater than 2A or 2B. And what A plus B means is that like you need multiple points of connection, right? So you're not just like going to advertise it on your website. People are going to know to go right to your website. You're probably going to need your website. You're probably and then add in some like email marketing. That'll give you more bang than like just having a better website or just having more email marketing, right? It's the combination of touch points that create more value. It gives the feeling of bulk. It gives the feeling of size. It gives the feeling of scope. That's true across industries. I don't know why that would be any different in tickets because I know it's not. I know, you need more touch points. That is something that the secondary market has done a really good job of, right? And I think like to ignore that, would be disingenuous. And then the third thing is that you like, there's something to learn from both sides. I think that's like something we probably didn't touch on nearly enough. I know that there was one note that we are not going to get to today that I made that we'll have to save it for the next time. But Eric, where do people find you on the internet?
In talks like this on my own podcast, they can email me, eric@fullerfacts.com, FACTS.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Eric. I will obviously I'll see you sooner rather than later.
Dave, can I add one thing to this before we go off?
Of course you can.
This year and last year, we had representatives from the 930 Club come to the World Ticket Conference. This most recent year, Audrey Fix-Schaefer and Dana Frank both came, and they were offered a panel slot if they wanted to speak, and they were admitted to everything. And I think it would be only appropriate for those ladies to offer Dave and me an invitation to come down to the NEVA convention because we were gracious. And unless they
why am I getting thrown in the middle of this?
Unless they have something to hide, they should have a couple of beer drinking buddies to come down and just hang out with. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I will go hang out with anybody and talk the tickets with them, and I'm happy to. Again, thank you for doing this, and I'll see you soon. Let me know what you thought of my conversation with Eric by sending me an email. It's my name, dave@davewakeman.com. As I mentioned at the start, check out my website. It's davewakeman.com. Get the Talking Tickets newsletter at talkingtickets.substack.com. I am booking guests for 2026. So if you have a suggestion or a topic you'd like to see us cover here at the Business of Fun, send me an email. It's my name, Dave, at davewakeman.com. You just send me an email to say hi. It does not matter. I love to hear. As I often say, I couldn't do this without you. So if you found the podcast useful, entertaining, or both, please share it with your colleagues, your friends, anybody that might benefit from a conversation like the one I just had with Eric Fuller. And do me a favor, subscribe, rate, and review the podcast. It helps me continue to get great guests. It helps people find the podcast. It helps me grow the podcast. So do that for me. And as always, thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you soon. Take it easy.